Welcome to the TEFL Training Institute podcast, the bite-sized TEFL podcast for teachers, trainers, and managers.
Hi everyone.
Hello everyone.
A couple of weeks ago I was in a job interview and the person interviewing me was asking me about my experience teaching kids and teaching adults. And at some point during the conversation she said to me, yeah, but teaching kids is completely different from teaching adults, isn't it? And I said, actually, I don't think it's different at all.
I remember you mentioned it before. You said it's basically the same, but I kind of disagree with you. I think there are a lot of differences between teaching adults and kids.
So today we're going to talk about teaching English to kids and adults, and we've got 4 questions. First of all,
we're going to talk about the differences between teaching kids and adults. And the second one is the similarities.
Then we'll look at tips for teachers who used to teach kids, who are moving into teaching adults. And finally, look at tips for people who are used to teaching adults, who are moving into teaching kids. So Tracy, you said that you thought the two are very different. So do you want to tell us, what do you think are some of the differences between teaching kids and teaching adults?
So it's very obvious, and they are at different stages of their life. So I would say for the very little ones, we definitely need to pay a lot of attention to manage their behaviors. So you have to spend a lot of time to make sure they sit down on their chair and they do what you say.
Okay, I agree with this, that I think with adults, you don't need to teach them how to behave, but with kids, part of the learning process is teaching them how to behave in class and thus eventually how to behave in society.
Yeah.
So I know you wanted to say one of the differences that adults often choose to study a second language themselves, whereas kids are often forced to study, right? So the teachers have to make more of an effort to motivate the students.
Yeah, because we talk about the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivation. Whatever the motivation dominate the adult learners, but generally speaking, they're motivated either for work purpose or personal interest. But for kids, I think most of them are not that highly motivated because, after work and they have to.
After work?
No,
They're all child laborers. After school, maybe.
After school. I don't know. I think most of them, they're thrown into the extracurriculum classes by their parents.
Or they might be in a school learning a foreign language, which is also probably even more common.
Yeah. So I don't think most of them are that interested in it. So they realize they had to do it, otherwise they'll be punished by their parents.
Okay, so I agree with you that adults are maybe usually have some more intrinsic motivation. Not all the time. Like some people might have to study English to take a test, or they might have to study English in order to be able to get a green card to stay in America or something. I think it's kind of similar extrinsic motivation. They don't necessarily want to do it themselves, but there's some financial reward. So for me, it's still important that if you're teaching adults that you're able to motivate your students. I guess maybe the difference is that if you're teaching adults and your students are motivated, you might have 15 or 20 bored people in your class. Whereas if you teach kids and they're unmotivated and you can't control them, then everyone will be fighting and throwing pens and stuff at each other.
Actually, there is another one.
Okay.
That we mentioned before is about
So I forgot.
Attention span.
So for me, this is the only real difference. Well, not that's a lie, right? But the biggest, I guess, difference is attention span. So that as adults, I think we say that we can concentrate on a task for about 15 minutes at a time. Some people more. The younger you get, the shorter the attention span is. So maybe when you get down to 3-year-olds, they can only concentrate on something for, I guess, about 3 to 5 minutes at a time.
Okay, let's talk about the similarities because Ross, you a few times mentioned it to different people, and to me, there's no big difference. So why do you say that?
So I think all teachers have to engage their students. They have to show them language in a context. They have to get students to interact with different people so they feel confident working with different people. And they need to try and make their lessons enjoyable and fun. And I think that's true of pretty much every language class that there is, regardless of the age group. And I think, well, what are the things that change? It's just the needs of the learners. But you could say that it's not necessarily based on people's age. So I was just talking about attention span. So if it were me and I was planning a class for 3-year-olds, then I would make the activities a lot shorter than I would for adults. But all I'm doing is...
You won't have like a 5 minutes listening for 3 years old.
Right. Yeah. But you could do that with advanced level adults.
Yeah.
So why am I doing that? Because it matches the needs of the student. So I think the age group is just one of a number of different factors that teachers have to think about when they're planning lessons.
So I think that's why a lot of KISS teachers, when they started teaching adults, for example, on the Certiso courses, and they thought, oh, it's so difficult and I really don't know what to do and how to motivate them. I don't think it's because the techniques are very different. It's because they didn't know what the learners need.
Or I think it's like they don't know why they're doing the things they're doing. That's why I always find the problem is people like go in and teach adults and they play games. Why do kids teachers play games with kids? It's because when kids go outside of the classroom, like when you were at school during break time, what did you do? You played games with your friends. So what do you need to do in the class to make your lessons and the language relevant? Put them inside games. So if you do the same thing with adults, it's irrelevant because as adults, you play games sometimes, but you don't play games very often. So
especially when you have some
business people,
and they feel it's like so childish.
Yeah, because it is childish because they don't do that outside class. Now, what do you do with adults? You do maybe role plays that are related to their jobs, or you might do something about writing a CV or discussing your favorite kind of movie. If you do that with 7-year-olds, it's not going to be relevant to them either because those are not things they do outside the classroom. So I think for all of it, for me, the big similarities, all we try and do is make sure the activities inside the class are similar to what
they experience in life.
Exactly.
But can I ask you another question? You just mentioned context setting. I think it's quite challenging for the KISS teachers when we're talking about that.
Yeah.
They feel, wow, KISS, we talk about real life and you talk about games.
Yeah.
But how can we make it
maybe
so
games
real?
are just kind of real life enough, are they? That like you can play games with kids and that if they're using the language in a game, maybe that's a realistic context.
Yeah, I remember
for them.
one teacher mentioned about the class she was teaching, talking about the pirates or something. So when you're talking about the context setting, how likely they're going to experience like being a pirate.
Yeah, but did you ever pretend to be something else when you were a kid? Did you ever play like at Doctors and Nurses, or did you ever pretend to be Princess Tracy or something?
Yeah, Teacher Tracy or something.
Yeah.
Dream came true.
So for teachers who have been teaching kids who have to teach adults, which I think is quite common if you've been a teacher before and then you end up doing a CELTA or a Cert TESOL or something, and all of a sudden you have to teach adults, what are some of the biggest problems that you notice that those teachers have?
I think first is the teacher language. You don't want to make it sound very condescending because when you're talking to the adult learners, like high five, 20 times in a lesson, and it's a bit too much.
Yeah.
But I think KISS teachers definitely they're really good at setting up their positive and
keeping attention. I think I notice are usually very good at that.
And they usually have some really interesting activities and make students stand up and move around. So always keep the engagement level high.
I think because they're used to these very short attention spans, they know if they don't do all these things to engage the students, then they get bored. But I think the problem is as adults, that can get really frustrating if you change activities every 3 minutes and you're moving around all the time.
Yeah.
You go, for God's sake, can we sit down, please? Like, I remember when I first taught adults getting this feedback, someone said, I signed up for an English class, not a gym. Really?
Okay.
So one of my pet hates is when you get teachers telling adults, like, put your phone away or pay attention or something. And you just go, maybe this person's a doctor and they're maybe getting out a message going, you need to come to the hospital now. And you have some teacher going, put your phone away. Like, I think that's not your job. It is your job to get people's attention, but I don't think you can be pissed off at people if they don't pay attention.
I think basically what we're talking about is customer service. I'm not saying teaching kids, you should ignore that. But I think for adults, you need to bear that in mind a bit more.
To bring up that thing you said about customer service. I think one of the other differences, the difference between the customer and the consumer.
Yeah.
Right. So the customer is the person that pays the money, and the consumer is the person that uses the goods. So if you teach adults, it's usually the same person. I've paid for an English course, I'm the customer. I take the English course, so I'm the consumer. So you just have one person to keep happy. But if you're teaching kids, usually the customer is the parent and the consumer
are the kids.
is the kids. So you have to sort of use different ways to keep both people happy. So Tracy, finally, then, what about tips for teachers who are used to teaching adults who end up having to teach kids?
We talked about at the beginning, needs to spend more time working on manage the kids' behavior. Again, if you want to find out more information, I recommend you listen to our podcast and talking about manage kids' behavior. Adult teachers don't really pay attention to that. They don't need to worry about, just sit down in your chair and put your hands on your knee and stand up.
Because I guess by the time we're adults, we've learned to control our own behavior to the point that we are able to sit and pay attention, or at least pretend to pay attention, even if we find something boring. But if you're kids, you're not able to control your own impulses as much. And also, I think as an adult, you want to conform to society and you don't want to make the teacher feel bad. But if you're 10 years old, you don't care what the teacher feels. If the teacher's boring, it's fine not to pay attention and do something different.
And another one I think is the energy level, because with kids you have to do a lot of demonstration. Maybe for one activity you need to show them how to do it, 3 times or more. But for adults, maybe you need to demonstrate once or twice and then doing monitoring. So it's not that tiring, but I think kids teachers, they feel tired quicker.
I know, I find it a lot more tiring teaching kids than adults, but then I also found it more rewarding as well, because I think you could see the kids making a lot more progress compared to the adults.
And another thing is, I watch some other teachers' classes, and I think it's quite interesting. It's really, really simple. Just ask the kids to practice. What's your name? My name is. How are you? I'm fine. I'm sad. The teacher give the kids the paper microphone.
Oh, wow.
So they have to interview each other using the paper microphone.
Cool.
Like, what's your name? My name is. How are you? I'm fine. So just give them a very simple physical tool, and then they can use it to practice. You imagine without that tool, it might be really boring.
But just by bringing imagination, because again, did you ever pretend to interview someone when you were a kid? Me and my sister used to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so pretend to be the bus conductor all the time.
That's your favorite job.
Yeah.
I thought I was a teacher.
Well, I was a kid.
What, you changed a lot?
Yeah.
I guess one other big difference is that I think adults, because they're cognitively more developed, they might ask you a lot more questions about grammar, whereas I think kids don't. But they're not really concerned so much about the mechanics of the language. So I think if you try and start explaining grammar to kids, then they're going to be extremely bored and probably quite confused and a little bit lost. So I would avoid doing that if you're used to doing that with adults.
Yeah.
So going from teaching adults to teaching kids, apparently people say that when you're a kid, you're really used to not understanding what's going on around you, because a lot of the conversations you hear your parents talk about or things you see on TV, you don't really know what's going on. So if you're in a language class, you're kind of used to like not really understanding what the teacher's saying. But if you're teaching adults, right, as adults, we're not used to that. So a lot of people find it really uncomfortable to be in a language class where they don't understand what the teacher's saying and what the teacher is asking them all the time. So
never thought about it.
Yeah, for kids, if they don't really 100% understand what's going on or what you're asking them, it's okay. Or kids are going to be comfortable with that, where adults are going to be more likely to be frustrated, which I think is why adults always end up looking up things on their phone. Okay, so do you agree with me anymore now that teaching adults is the same as teaching kids?
I won't say I agree with you more, but...
So do you agree?
Yeah, but I understand your point. Like, a lot of things are applicable for both.
After discussing it, I kind of agree as well with you that there are quite a lot of differences with different age groups.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. If you've got a question or a topic that you'd like us to discuss, send us an email or leave us a comment.
If you'd like to listen to more podcasts, please visit our website,
www.tefltraininginstitute.com.